Today I will be talking about 2D animation. Yes, you heard right. I'm not talking Jungle Book, I'm talking Jungle Book. I'm not talking Avatar, I'm talking Avatar! The creme de la creme of digital art. This isn't a front against 3D animation, of course. Anyone who knows how to use Blender is a god in my eyes. But there's just something so magical about 2D animation that I just can't help but absolutely adore it. To give you a heads up, I will not be talking about the history of 2D animation, since it's boring. Instead, I will move on to the actual process of animating, and then I will also go over some useful animation techniques that I was able to pick up over the years. Without further ado, let's get started. The process of animation. Classic 2D animation is quite simple in its concept. You have keyframes, which mark the beginning and the end of a motion, and you have in-betweens that connect those keyframes. But instead of placing two keyframes and then digitally generating in-betweens, like in After Effects for example, you have to carefully draw both keyframes by hand. And then you also have to draw all of the in-betweens by hand. Because 2D animation, at its core, is pain. But let's start from the beginning, shall we? When working on an animation project, the first step, after writing the script of course, is making a storyboard. The storyboard visualizes the entire layout of the scene you want to animate in the form of a roughly animated sketch, usually consisting of a reduced number of keyframes. This way you can already plan out all of the important aspects of your scene, like camera angles, choreography, and frame layout. Depending on the artist, some storyboards can look more detailed than others. Once you're happy with your storyboard, you can start with the actual animation process. It's time to add more keyframes and in-betweens, finalize your sketch, then add some outlines and colors. Can't forget about the special effects of course, as well as the shading and lighting. In professional animation studios, different people are in charge of character design, storyboarding, and finalizing the animation. Character designers focus on creating easily readable and recognizable characters that are animation friendly at the same time, meaning easy shapes, no unnecessary details, and no random spots floating around in an empty space. Storyboard artists specialize in cinematography and are in charge of creating enticing scenes that are fun to watch and draw the viewers in. Character animators make sure the characters move in a natural and readable way that won't confuse the viewers. Their job is to make the characters come alive. Of course, we also need a background for the scene. That's where our background artists come into play. In professional industries, these are usually also separated into two groups: background designers and background painters. The background designers are in charge of planning out the layout of the background, deciding what should be where, making sure the elements fit together, and fit the narrative of the scene. Background painters step in afterwards to add colors to the design and giving it the right feeling for the scene. Backgrounds sometimes have to be separated into multiple layers. For example, if a character walks behind a table. In that case, the table would technically be part of the foreground, but those parts are still drawn by the background artists. Another instance where you have to separate your layers is when you want your background to move. Having different parts of the background that move at different speeds adds to the sense of reality. As you can see, there's a lot that goes into animation. That's why artists develop useful tricks and techniques that make the process a little bit more easy. Here are a few things that I've picked up myself over the years. Less is more. It's important to know that you don't have to animate in 24 frames per second to create a smooth animation. If you use your keyframes correctly and exaggerate the poses of your characters in a readable way, the movements can look just as lively. Look at this incredible animation, for example. This thing flows like butter on a hot knife. Now guess how many frames per second this was animated in. 10. The answer is 10. And in case you were wondering, I usually animate in 16 FPS. Different colored layers. You probably already saw this in a few of the clips that I was showcasing. When creating a sketch, artists often like to separate the body of their characters from their clothes and hair. This comes especially handy in animation, since it's easy to change parts of your drawing without destroying something else. When doing this though, it can be easy to get confused with all of the different lines floating around. That's why it's a good thing when you use different colors for different layers. Smear frames. When filming with a camera, fast-moving objects often create motion blur. Since this isn't something that can happen while drawing digitally, animators often replace this stylistic device in the form of smear frames. They help with bringing across high speeds and movement. Smear frames can be thin lines, medium-sized lines, or really large ones. And they look ridiculous when you pause on them. Here are some examples. Isn't that just beautiful? Impact frames. Impact frames are mostly used during action scenes and make certain impacts, as the name suggests, feel much more powerful. They usually last between 1 and 5 frames and showcase a bright light. So bright, in fact, that everything else in the scene is cast in a black shadow. Impact frames often mark the beginning of an explosion or a gunshot, but they can also be used to make a punch, for example, feel absolutely over the top, since you are comparing the impact of your fist with the one of a bomb. And those were all the tips that I have for you right now. I made this video to showcase my love for 2D animation. It's a form of art that requires lots of work and patience, but for me, the payoff of seeing my character come to life is absolutely worth it. Sadly, animators who work in the industry often don't get paid nearly enough for all the work they have to put in to create our favorite shows or movies. So the next time you watch an old Disney movie or your favorite cartoon, remember how much work has gone into it and show the animators some love. That's all. Thanks for watching.